All right, the recording begins. It is September 10th. Yep, and this is ESM 105. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's check in real quick. We're here in week 3. You need to complete quiz 1. Remember, it's going to cover the week 1 through 2 PowerPoint, which we will finish today by hook or by crook, right? I'm gonna get us through that, all right? It also includes Sand County Almanac. So it opened up this morning, but we're gonna wrap up the slides that are relevant, and then it will be open until the 12th at 11:59 p.m. So that's Friday, right? You got a couple days to do it. Yeah. Any questions about that? It is 13 multiple choice questions and 1 short answer question relating to the reading. You've got 60 minutes to do it. There you go. Cool. Otherwise, just start reading The Future of Life. I'm rereading it, right now because it's, I'm assigning you to read it, so I'm trying to do the same thing. It's okay. The prologue's pretty rough to get through. I remember that from the last time I read this book. I've read it a few times now. The prologue is always difficult, especially if you haven't read Walden. It's like, what is he even talking about? Yeah. You can read Walden during the summer. You don't have to read that during this class. It's even more of just a cataloging of things. Anyways, it's very interesting. It's a classic. I'm not going to go on a recording saying that Walden is dry and gets uninteresting at about the halfway point. That's no good. I'm an ecologist. I have to love it. I would never say that, and I never said that. And there's no evidence except for the recording of me saying it. All right, cool. If there aren't any questions, I'd love to get us back into the material, okay? Remember, the course just works like this. We're kind of it's week 3, so we're kind of hitting our stride in how the course operates. We are just going to be crushing PowerPoints, covering these topics. You'll have periodic quizzes, which I'll give you plenty of heads up about, and all that stuff. And then there's that annotated bibliography assignment, which you have to complete in order to pass the course. Check the syllabus if you have any questions about the course structure. We also have a final exam, which will be online. It's only 50 points, but it's there. Okay? Cool. I feel like at week 3, you're all kind of locked in since the add drop deadline finished. So now I just want to touch base one last time. Okay, I can't wait to finish up talking about matter, energy, and life. And then we'll get into, on Friday, the week 3 through week 4 material. We should be able to get all synced up again. Matter, energy, life. Okay. So I know I always am justifying, why do we talk about these basic scientific principles? Because they're underlying, or they're the way that we in the Western scientific method look at the world, okay? So you need to understand these basic fundamental principles and laws so you can understand all of the models that have been generated to model ecological behavior, all of the ways that we assess the effectiveness of conservation practices, okay? Just why we measure the things we measure for statistical analyses, all right? So even if you're never gonna be a chemist, you should understand basically how a chemist sees the world at the fundamental level. Because let's go really basic broad stroke sciences, right? The biologist, the physicist, and the chemist look at the world through different lenses and with different models. All of these models let them make important predictions, and they all have an understanding of the world through that lens, but they don't always agree. Now you, as an ecologist or as somebody working in conservation, need to deal with people from all of these disciplines, so it's nice to be able to meet them with their terminology and understand their viewpoint on just how to measure the world around us, how to quantify things. Anyways, ecology, let's talk about it. It's great. It brings it all together. Abiotic, biotic components, defined these terms last time. We talked about systems last time as well, and how these state variables move through systems, like energy moves through a system and it changes forms all the time. All right, so let's just do our basic chemistry review. All right, matter, if it has mass and it takes up space, then it is matter, all right? Solids, liquids, gases, plasma, these all have mass and they take up space. They are matter, okay? What differentiates these? It's all about the intermolecular forces, the intermolecular bonds, and how stable they are. In ice, the solid, the bonds between the water molecules are stable and strong, and you get a solid thing. This is an oxygen, and these are the hydrogens, and they associate like this in the polar molecule. All right? I'm also a secret agent. Very cool. Okay. Very good. So we've got the intermolecular bonds that are really stable in a solid. In a liquid, the bonds are not as stable, but they're forming and then breaking, and then forming and then breaking. So the liquid has some stability to it. It's got all these like transient bonds that are forming and breaking. And then in a gas, the thing has so much energy, okay, that the bonds are just not, the intermolecular bonds aren't even forming, okay? In a plasma, there's so much energy in it that the intramolecular bonds break, okay? And now the hydrogens, the oxygens, those fall apart. And then the actual atoms of the elements, those fall apart as well. And you get disassociated protons, neutrons, and electrons. It's a super high energy state of matter because those intramolecular bonds are very stable, okay? But you can make matter go through all of those state transitions if you jam in enough energy. Very briefly, we have a measurement of energy, of kinetic energy of molecules, which sort of predicts if the substance is if the matter will be in the liquid, solid, gas, or plasma phase. Can anybody tell me the quantitative measurement we use for kinetic energy of molecules? Yes? Kelvin? Yep, exactly. Temperature, right? So Kelvin, Celsius, any of those measurements is a quantitative measure of, So your answer is correct. What I was shooting for was temperature, though. And since you couldn't read my mind, I'm going to have to deduct points. Very good. All right, solid. So we've got the different states of matter. All right. Do we understand sort of what separates these? It's all about those intermolecular bonds. Cool. Conservation of matter. Conservation of energy. All right, just these concepts. That things don't get created, things don't get destroyed as they move through systems. They just change forms. Cool? All right. Elements. I put a lot of stuff on here. These are the 4 basic sort of biological. These are examples of the major types of biological macromolecules that the biologist considers, that the biochemist considers, okay? The types of molecules that make up life. So elements, what are the elements? You know about the periodic table of the elements. Oh, there's one here as well. There's one on either side of the room. Isn't that handy? The periodic table of the elements, it describes these elements, okay, these atoms that are sort of the fundamental unit of matter. They have characteristics that are really based around how many protons are in their nucleus, all right? And then that determines bonding behaviors between atoms, which allows macromolecules to exist. We'll talk a little bit about that, but it's not our main focus today. So we've got the atoms, the fundamental unit of matter. If you break the atom down at all, then it changes its characteristic. That sort of makes sense. Atoms of different elements get combined into compounds. You can have solutions that are made up of all one element, all right? Or you can have solutions that are made up of all one type of molecule, or solutions that are a bunch of different molecule types. But at some level, you probably have an understanding of atoms and elements and what they are, and that understanding is probably going to work for you, okay, for our needs. Now, there's a bunch of elements out there, but if I was to be desiccated, dried out, and then analyzed for the elements in my body, I'd be mainly oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. 96% of what you see before you is that, all right? But look at what I'm capable of. Wow, fascinating. Now, so those different atoms, those different elements, right, get joined in a bunch of different patterns to make these big, complicated molecules. And then those big, complicated molecules, those macromolecules, all right, those are associated together to make all of these complicated cell types and tissues and give you all the complexity that you see. But at the fundamental level, there's really like, what, 4 main building blocks for life right there: oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. And then there's 4 main types of biological macromolecules, which is also handy. All right, let's take a look at them. This is not to say that other elements are not essential for life, okay? There are many other elements that are essential for life, but they are, or for complex life, but they are only necessary in small amounts. Sort of makes sense? Okay, awesome. So the 4 main types of biological macromolecules. I've got images of their structures, and look, this is a fat molecule, a triglyceride, all right? Waxes, oils, fats, they have this general structure. Look at them. It's carbon, it's hydrogen, it's oxygen. That's it, okay? Pretty wild. So there are fats, there are sugars, okay, or the carbohydrates, right? The carbohydrates are the sugars. They look like this. They're carbon, they're oxygen, they're hydrogen. The cellulose in a plant cell wall is made up of a bunch of carbohydrates. There are structural carbohydrates in your body. There are structural carbohydrates in the carapace of an insect or a sea insect. What are those things called? Crustaceans, right? That's good stuff. All right. But look, it's all carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, just joined in different orders. Okay? Then we've got the nitrogenous bases, the nucleotides. All right? The big biological macromolecules being the polynucleotides, okay, or the nucleic acids. That's DNA and RNA. The blueprints that are used to direct protein synthesis inside of your body in an overly simplified understanding of what DNA is. Look at DNA, okay? It's mainly, the DNA molecule is made up of sugars, phosphate groups, and these nitrogenous bases. So here's some nitrogen in that DNA. A lot of it's still going to be carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. Now, DNA is read and used to direct the synthesis of proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids. Here's what an amino acid looks like. And here we've got a little more nitrogen. This is the amine group that gives it its name of an amino acid. So our key nitrogen needs come from the nucleic acids and proteins, all right? Your body needs nitrogen in relatively high amounts. It's one of the 4 big ones, okay? All right? Why? Because, well, the main reason is you gotta synthesize all of these amino acids to make any of the proteins that let you function, okay? It's really important. So, you've got all of these senses that help you acquire the things that your body needs, like identifying things as sweet or fatty. Umami as a flavor profile, or as a flavor that your body can sense, exists so that you can detect nitrogen-containing compounds, proteins, all right? That's why a high-protein meal makes you say, ooh, mommy, that's a good burger. It's fun. We have fun here, all right? So that's why that flavor profile exists, which is kind of interesting. It'll help you, I promise, that'll help you remember, like, where's the nitrogen needed? It's for the proteins, all right? That's why it's in a burger. Okay, cool. So we're just gonna keep moving forward. Atoms. Elements are composed of atoms. All right? What's an atom composed of? Protons, neutrons, electrons. I hope it's all review. If it's not, it's no problem. Let me just tell you a brief story. When I was in high school, we had one science class that was called science, and our grade was mainly made up of how accurate a catapult we built was, and they called that the physics module. Okay, so I came to university not knowing any of this stuff. And now I got a PhD, I'm in the front of the room, you know? So if you don't know this stuff, you don't have to feel bad. It doesn't mean that you can't move forward. Plus, maybe your high school teacher would have taught you bad stuff, you know, like bad science, which is what, if they'd let mine teach, I'm sure it would have been inaccurate anyways. But I'll tell you what, from what I hear, he was a very good softball coach, and that's why they hired him. Good stuff. Elements, what are they made up of? So we've got these atoms are these indivisible primary parts. They've got the same word root. It all comes from the word roots of like atom and an indivisible thing. It's all very interesting. Okay, protons, neutrons, electrons. Solid? If you got questions, don't be shy. The atomic number, if you look at the cell of the periodic table, the atomic number, okay, is given in red at the top on these. It tells you the number of protons. The number of protons dictates the number of electrons. The number of electrons and their arrangement dictates all of the bonding patterns for the atom. That determines how chemically reactive it is. Okay? And that's our fundamental chemistry, yeah. The number of neutrons are super annoying, right? Because it tends to be, you'll see there's this pattern of, oh, the mass tends to be like twice the mass of, it tends to be twice the number, but the neutrons don't actually determine the chemical characteristics of the molecule beyond the molecule's, or the atom, sorry, the atom's mass, all right? And there can be different forms of each atom that are still, there's some hydrogen has an extra neutron, but it's still hydrogen. So as far as what determines it, I don't have a good answer for you, you know? But I can tell you what it determines. And there's very fascinating things about that. Like, oh yeah, totally, same here. I was like, you know, I'm sure somebody tried to explain why the number tends to be equal, but then it isn't as you get into these bigger molecules at all, you know? But I'll tell you what, as a plant physiologist, my life mainly focused on these first 3 rows, really on these first 2 rows, and that just worked. You know what I mean? So anyways, with those, it's pretty common to have the same number. Okay, great. Oh yeah, right here, isotopes. So the atomic number dictates the number of protons. The number of protons dictates the number of electrons. The number of electrons dictates how reactive the molecule is and what bonds it can form. The atom, I keep saying molecule, I'm so sorry, okay? The number of neutrons. Neutrons and protons both have mass, but neutrons have no charge. So they don't have any effect on the number of electrons, and therefore they don't affect how the atom behaves, but they do make the atom heavier or lighter. And that's very, very important when we're doing things like tracking the movement of molecules through biochemical pathways. Currently, an example that you may actually use, they're using isotope ratios to determine bird migration patterns without having to capture the bird. They just take a feather and they look at how much heavy carbon versus light carbon is in the tissue of this feather that the bird made. I'll keep it very brief, but if the bird feeds at higher elevations, the CO2 up there has more light carbon in it because the heavy carbon settles down low. That means that the plant material there has more light carbon isotopes. So the bird that feeds on that material and builds up feathers, its feathers are going to have more light carbon isotopes. So while this isn't as accurate as putting a tracker on a bird or banding and doing all that, it's way less labor intensive, and it isn't as harmful to the animal, because you just have to find a feather that it naturally dropped. You analyze it and you go, okay, cool. This seems to have fed at more high elevations. We're going to extrapolate that it followed this migration pattern based on, there's a lot of cool models for modeling bird movements. All right. Okay. Isotopes. Solid. They'll come up. You'll be shocked. So this is not irrelevant to work as a conservationist, okay? Or an ecologist, or whatever you choose to be. You know what, it would be irrelevant for some fields that you may choose to enter, but that's okay too. You're in college, you're gonna learn a lot of things that aren't relevant to you. All right. Compounds, molecules, bonds, great stuff. Let's do it quick, but slow me down if you have any questions. Two different types of elements joined together make a compound. That compound will have emergent properties. Remember, emergent properties is a concept in ecosystems, okay? Those emergent properties. So what I'm saying here is like sodium, this is the classic example. This isn't anything new. Sodium is a soft metal. Chlorine is a poisonous gas. Those are each elements. Those are each atoms. You join them together to make a molecule, okay? And you get sodium chloride, and that's salt, and you can eat it, and we love it. So the compound can have different characteristics from just each constituent element that makes it. Yeah, because it's in a compound. It is not the same as just pure mercury. Yeah, absolutely. And same thing with things like magnesium. It's all, yeah. So we've got these emergent properties in compounds. A molecule is a general term for multiple atoms joined together. So you could have a molecule that is not a compound, like a molecule of oxygen, an O2 molecule. It's two oxygen atoms joined together. Or you can have the molecule of sodium chloride, which is a compound. All right? The bond, the chemical bond, okay, is the thing holding the atoms together in the molecules. So we would consider all of this so far, we're talking about intra or within molecular forces. The things holding molecules together. Please, yes? It is a molecule. Yes.
Sodium chloride is a compound.
You could technically refer to water as a compound because it's multiple elements joined together. But it's also think of the molecule as the big umbrella term. And underneath it, we have compounds of different elements, and then we have molecules that are comprised of the same element. Those both fall under molecule is the big umbrella term.
That kind of threw me off because compounds on the top of the slide.
I hear you. Yeah, it would make sense for me to organize this, Yeah, these are all fresh slides. You'll be the first people to put eyes on them. So I absolutely think that would work. Have compounds as the bullet point underneath molecules would make more sense. Yeah, I agree. Cool. Thank you for asking for the clarification. Solid. Okay. Different types of chemical bonds. We've got ionic bonds and covalent bonds. This is all based around electronegativity, or how much each element wants electrons. Okay? Take a look over here at the periodic table. It is conveniently organized for you, okay? The organization of the periodic table, it's been huge debates, fights, arguments, careers destroyed, careers built, It's a story that you could totally go down a rabbit hole on. I did an undergrad, and I've forgotten all the details. But there have been all these different forms of the periodic table. The current periodic table that we all look at isn't the only periodic table organization that exists, but it tells us a couple of important things. And one of them is electronegativity of different atoms or different elements. Really, how badly they want electrons. And this is really important. So take a look right here. As you move to the right and up on the periodic table, okay, electronegativity increases. So the most electronegative elements are over here. If we look at sodium and chlorine, sodium's on the far left, chlorine's on the far right. Sodium is not very electronegative. but chlorine is highly electronegative, okay? So when they come into proximity, chlorine just steals the electron off of sodium. It makes a negative ion of itself because now it has one more electron than protons, and then it has a negative charge. The sodium becomes a sodium ion, which now has a positive charge because it has one more proton than it has electrons. Okay? And now the negative particle and the positive particle associate because they have a different charge. And it's really good to not think too much about like what makes something positive versus negative and how does it work in a magnet versus how does it work at the atomic level, because it's just a brain buster, I'll tell you. Okay, so next, covalent bonds. In a covalent bond, the difference in electronegativity is not so great that one atom steals the electron from another. So look again at the periodic table, okay? We've got here hydrogen and oxygen. Now, hydrogen and oxygen are pretty far apart on the periodic table. They're not as far apart as sodium and chlorine, and there's other things that contribute to this as well, but the important thing is oxygen won't steal the electron entirely off of hydrogen. It will share it, like cooperate, a covalent bond where the electron is shared between the two atoms. So these are covalent bonds. Now, if there's a big difference in electronegativity, well, then in that case, you've got a polar covalent bond where the electrons spend more time in one part of the molecule than in other parts of the molecule. So if we look at water, it's a very, very polar molecule because of the high difference in electronegativity between oxygen and hydrogen. The electrons spend more time orbiting here, so they give the molecule a partial negative charge and a partial positive charge here. Yes, please. Yes, yes, because when these water molecules come into proximity with one another, they have a very strong intermolecular force called the hydrogen bond. So the more polar a molecule is, the more integrity a solution of that molecule will have. Water is super stable. This is also why it takes a lot of energy to heat up water, why it's a good energy carrier around the globe. We'll talk, of course, about global ocean currents at some point. It has a high specific heat. All these characteristics come from the fact that the water molecule is very polar, allowing it to form hydrogen bonds with other molecules. It's all about those intermolecular forces for the solution. And sometimes in a covalent bond, the two elements share the electrons basically equally. So hydrogen and carbon, even though they're a little bit apart on the periodic table, okay, that's going to be the most important non-polar covalent bond that you need to be aware of, because it's going to dictate the behavior of oils and fats and things like that. So carbon to hydrogen is a non-polar bond. Oxygen to hydrogen is a polar bond, okay? Sodium to chlorine, all right, there's such a difference in electronegativity that chlorine will steal the electron, give both molecules charge, and then the charges will associate, making an ionic bond. How do we feel about this? It's basically like the first 2 weeks of chemistry jammed into a couple of slides. Yes, please.
Okay, so about polar bonds. So
Yeah.
Are ionic bonds polar bonds?
Ionic bonds are not polar bonds.
Okay, so covalent bonds are the polar bonds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Are they always polar?
Covalent bonds? No. There can be polar covalent bonds, and then there are non-polar covalent bonds. Absolutely. And it's all based on the difference in electronegativity. So if you're ever looking at a molecule, you can probably guess if it's going to be polar or not by looking at the periodic table and saying how far apart are the elements or the atoms that make up the molecule. Now, there's another piece to it where the shape of the molecule matters too, but let's not panic about that in ESM 105.
Okay, I have chemist in it.
Oh, good. So you'll get that part too. That's great. You're in luck. Man, you know what? Report back. Let us know if I'm right about any of this. Because I'm just making it up.
I think you're pretty on the money.
Thanks. I'm trying to give you just the core key concepts. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So we are talking about energy moving through systems. Okay? So we need to talk about oxidation and reduction. Oxidation and reduction is all about moving electrons around. You can think about an electron as a little bit of a source of energy, okay? Let's use the water bottle. The water bottle is always my model for things, okay? I am a molecule, and I am carrying this electron. That electron is at a pretty high energy state. I slap it onto another molecule, okay? And now that molecule is at a higher energy state than it used to be. This electron lets me have more structure. I can yank a hydrogen ion out of solution, and now I got a dang hydrogen atom on me, okay? And that gives me more structure, more energy. Transfers of electrons are transfers of energy. Here I am holding this electron. Okay? Watch as I miraculously reduce this bench. Electrons have a negative charge. I am attaching an electron onto this bench. That bench has become reduced. Crazy, right? It has all this energy now. Okay. Now I lost an electron as part of that reaction. By necessity. The electron had to come from somewhere. It came from me, right? So I became oxidized. So this is what we call a redox reaction. It's a portmanteau of reduction and oxidation, which comes from the name for that French suitcase. It folds in half. It's a combination of two things, right? Like smog. We're cool with that term? Awesome. Electron transfers. Reduced, oxidized. All right? Think about it as energy is being transferred onto the thing that gets reduced from the thing that got oxidized. Please.
What is the etymological relevance of oxygen in this?
Oh, great question. Okay. So oxygen, well, we've only talked about one characteristic of oxygen. It's electronegativity, right? So things get oxidized because oxygen will rip electrons off of them. Oxidation, that's why things rust. You know, people talk about like, oh, iron oxidized, right? It does have to do with that, but it also has to do with oxygen pulling electrons off of things and allowing it to now become reactive enough to make the bonds. It does not have to be. It does not have to be. That's the very frustrating thing. So yeah, exactly. But that's why I'm introducing it from the reduction side, because the reduction makes sense, right? You're transferring an electron has a negative charge. The oxidation is the annoying one, but it's going to be very important when you eventually have to learn about cellular respiration and how oxygen operates to yank electrons down this electron transport chain that gives you all the ATP that you use. So, oh yeah, I'm 100% sure. But you know, it's not in textbooks. It's not how they teach. And so sometimes, well, you're welcome. I'm happy that this made more sense. That's my goal in this class, is to take these concepts that seemed maybe unapproachable in the things that aren't your focus and try to show you that, like, you can approach these concepts. That's my goal. And I don't accomplish it regularly, but sometimes, you know, it works. All right. Oh, that's good electron. Yeah. Okay. Oxidation, reduction, redox reactions. They're very important energy transfers. Yeah, I think that's all I really want to say about this. Forming bonds uses energy, breaking bonds releases energy. This is there's all this different terminology that chemists use, and then that physicists use to describe chemical reactions. It's usually based around, does the molecule get bigger or does it get broken down? And if a molecule gets built up, that requires energy. And if the molecule gets broken down, that releases energy. So that's going to be one of those state variables in the systems that we talk about. The carbon dioxide molecule, okay, gets built up into a high-energy glucose molecule. And then that high-energy glucose molecule gets broken down into a low-energy carbon dioxide molecule. The more complex a molecule is, the more energy it contains within it. Some bonds have more energy than others, but let's not get too out there. All right? So here's the global cycle of reduction and oxidation reactions, where you've got CO2 gets reduced into glucose, all right? And then glucose gets oxidized to release CO2, and also water, all right? But yeah, it's actually really fascinating. This is called metabolic water, and some organisms can live entirely off of metabolic water and never have to drink water. They just get water from breaking down organic compounds. But we don't have to worry about that. It talks about it in the future of life a little bit. Yes, please.
This oxidation is the same as like in like sea towns that the metal starts like rusting towards green.
You know what? It's a bad parallel for me to draw. I don't want to make that connection in your brain today, even though that is an oxidation reaction. Okay, it's better to try to disentangle those until you're ready to have like a real investigation into it. And I'm not prepared to present a real investigation into it in lecture today, so I'm just going to say, bah, like that. Okay, look over there. I distracted you, and now we're moving on. See, I just changed the slide. Okay, let's keep on moving forward. I want to let you know that I have, I think, maybe one chemistry question on your quiz this week. A lot of this is information that is relevant for you, and you don't have to become a chemist in this course. Just in case I'm causing you a lot of stress with how in-depth I'm going here, but all of this stuff matters. It's surface level, but a lot of different pieces. Okay, water matters. I have a note for me. Okay, I have a note for me. Oh, talking about this, we talked about it earlier. Oh my gosh, cool. Water molecules, they're important. They're all around us. They're within us. We love water, all right? Water's got some key characteristics that all come down to the fact that water is a highly polar molecule. Remember, that's because, does anybody remember, I think this is the lowercase, it's either sigma or, is it sigma or lambda? Delta? It's lowercase delta. Thank you, I always get it mixed up. All right, this indicates a partial charge, for what it's worth. So check it out, these water molecules end up with a partial positive, a partial negative charge. They are going to associate with other water molecules like this. Well, let me actually do it like so. Where the partial positive charges will neutralize the partial negative charges. Okay, the water molecules all associate together, and they make these strong intermolecular bonds that are called hydrogen bonds. All right? Now, hydrogen bonds, they don't only occur between molecules of water. They're called hydrogen bonds because hydrogen's not very electronegative. So in a molecule that has hydrogen and an electronegative element, you end up with a very polar molecule. The degree of polarity of the molecule determines how strong these interactions can be. Awesome. Okay, this stabilizes water. When a bunch of water is in a solution, it helps it to have all these other characteristics. So it takes a lot of energy to make water evaporate. That's one thing. Why? Because it's very stable. And to evaporate something, these molecules need to break. These bonds need to break, the intermolecular forces. So it's a high heat of vaporization. That means that your cells don't all boil when you get too warm. All right? If your cells are filled with a different liquid, it'd be a different situation. We've got cohesive nature. That means that water molecules will bond together because the water molecule is polar. Okay? When water solidifies, it crystallizes, right? The water molecules, okay, they fall into this really stable structure. So it's rare for substances to be less dense when they are solid, but water does that. Other substances, like if you have liquid iron, okay, and a block of it cools off enough to solidify, that block sinks to the bottom because it becomes more dense, all right? But with water, that's not the case. The stability of that structure that it forms when it solidifies means that it floats. You're aware of this because you've seen an ice cube in a beverage, okay? Why does it matter? Well, it's hugely important, say, in lake ecosystems where the water begins to freeze, it floats to the surface, it forms a sheet of ice that insulates the lower layers of the lake and prevents them from freezing and allows fish to survive throughout the seasons, okay? Fish is, I'm generalizing, it lets things survive, okay? So that keeps the ecosystem stable from year to year. And that wouldn't happen if water didn't have that special property, which it has because it's so polar, okay? High specific heat just means it can absorb more energy before it changes temperature, okay? Let's tell you real quick, all right? A calorie, we'll run through this real fast. A calorie is the amount of energy it takes to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. A gram of water is a milliliter of water. All of those terms sync up not because of coincidence, but it's because that's how they've been defined. So other substances could have a lower amount of energy that it takes to raise the temperature of the substance. You see what I'm saying there? That's the specific heat concept. It's interesting, I promise. Okay, believe it or not, it's all due to the polar covalent nature of the molecule. John, explain this on the board. I did, okay? Don't yell at me, slide. Didn't even do anything. Look at that. I bopped it and it didn't say anything back to me. I know. All right, cool. Ions. Ions have a full charge to them, okay? The sodium ion, the chloride ion, okay? They both have a full charge as opposed to the partial charge in a polar covalent molecule, all right? In water, there are 2 important ions that exist in a balance. It's hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, okay? H plus and OH. The water molecule in a solution is, you've got water molecules, and sometimes they break up and give you a hydrogen ion and a hydroxide ion. Okay? At different pHs, these are at different balances. When they're relatively equal in concentration, then it's mostly water, and you don't have all these reactive particles that destroy things. But if you have an excess of one of these ion types in a solution, it can become really harmful to organic tissue. It causes a lot of problems, okay? It causes proteins to break apart, all this stuff. So in a solution, we measure the concentration of these different ions by using the pH scale, okay? The pH scale runs from 0 to 14. 7 is neutral. Anything lower is acidic. Anything higher is basic. Okay? Just for your own interest, a pH of 3 tells you that the concentration of hydrogen ions is 10 to the -3 moles per liter. Just in case you're curious. So, we're not going to talk about scientific notation and stuff like that in the course. But I'd be happy to discuss it with you if you ever want to come by office hours or take Bio 105 from me. We're talking about this right now, as a matter of fact. Okay, I got to keep us moving forward. I moved too slow again because I really want to talk about these important biological macromolecules. Okay. Organic compounds. What makes a compound organic? It's carbon-based. All right? So a lot of it's carbon. It's got all these other little groups that come off of it. People, I don't know if people still do this, but back in the day, it used to be pretty common. You'd have like parents visiting, and you'd always have that one parent who was like, you're at an environmental college, and you're eating all this organic food. You know organic just means carbon, right? And it's like, thank you. Very good. Yes, that's not what it means with organic food labeling, but, that's okay. There's nothing worse than a person who knows like one thing. You know what I mean? Because they'll just apply it to everything and be like, I understand chemistry. I know what the word organic means. Whatever. I fall into that camp. I don't know everything. I know a few things, and sometimes I bang that hammer on things that it doesn't work on. Anyways, whatever. Organic compounds. They're carbon-based. These organic compounds form the basic building blocks of all these big biological macromolecules. 4 major categories of organic compounds or biological macromolecules: the lipids, the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the nucleic acids. What are they? Well, the lipids, are oils and fats and waxes. Their main characteristic is that they're hydrophobic. They're made up of non-polar bonds. All right, so we've got an example of that right here in this hydrocarbon of propane. Okay. Sugar is a carbohydrate. All right. They're mainly used for energy storage, but they can also be structural. Check it out. They're all organic molecules, right? The amino acid is the building block of the protein. The nucleotide is the building block of the nucleic acid. They're all organic molecules. The nucleotides, the amino acids, they both contain nitrogen in them. All right. Cool. Oh yeah, and then I had this transition happen because I don't really like I liked this image, but I didn't really like that the hydrocarbon example was a propane molecule. So I threw up a fat molecule up here, which is also a lipid. It's just mainly hydrocarbon. So it has no polarity to it. And if it's not polar, it won't dissolve in a polar solution like water. Like dissolves like is a good term to think about. So polar molecules dissolve into polar solutions. Non-polar molecules don't. Okay. So yeah, unfortunately, we are going to have to finish this on Friday. But that is cool because we can get through this on Friday. There's some cool stuff coming. The nitrogen to carbon cycles, the phosphorus cycles, you're going to love it. And this PowerPoint for this week technically is a week 3 to 4, so we'll get all caught up with it. Quiz 3, remember, covers this whole PowerPoint. So if you want to wait until Friday to complete it, you can. Or you can complete it referencing this PowerPoint. All right, all the information you need. I did my very best to make sure it was all contained within the PowerPoints. All right, have a great day, everybody. Thank you for making it to class again. I'm going to end this recording, and I'll see you all later.